When you do it this way, when you do this effectively, aligning that CPC with the RPC, what you're able to do is get more total volume within your target ACoS. Someone was asking, can you prove that this works? And I was like, well, the sample data in there is from a real account, so that should be some proof. What this calculator will help you do is figure out by how much you should be increasing for each placement in order to maximize your sales opportunity.
Welcome back, everybody, to That Amazon Ads podcast. We're here today to talk about a topic that we talked about on another episode. Is actually our most watched YouTube video that we've put out to date. So definitely an exciting topic, something that people really enjoyed and got a lot of value from. We're going to be talking about placement settings and how to calculate those placement settings, which in the last video, we talked about sponsored products. In this video, we're actually going to be diving into sponsored brands and explaining some of the nuance, some of the differences that come with calculating those placement settings for sponsored brands. So here with me to share that information and teach you exactly how to do this is our very own Stephen Knock. How you doing?
Doing well, man. Yeah, you're right. That is the number one most watched video of all time with 2,000 views, which is pretty solid compared to our almost 1,000 subscribers. So almost a 2-to-1 view to subscriber ratio. Help us break that 1,000 mark. Don't forget to like and subscribe, especially if you've been a long-time follower of us and you haven't yet subscribed. Please do that because that makes us happy. But we mentioned on a few episodes that I was really kind of botching my explanation in the sponsored products one. I just I don't know, I got kind of, I tripped myself up. I was trying to get too technical and then trying to make it not so technical and couldn't really get a what's the word? I couldn't get I guess it's happening again now. Couldn't get a sense of how I should be describing this to our audience. So I will just say we're going to do a little bit of a refresher kind of review of what we did with sponsored products, just a super quick overview. And then we will dive into the sponsored brand side of things. And we've got our campaign placement calculator for you here, this free resource. And so that link will be below, so you guys can definitely check it out. Make a copy of it for yourselves. You can't, don't click on this and request access to edit this. I get so many emails from people requesting access to edit this. You don't do that. You have to hit file, make a copy, then you have your own copy that you can edit. This public version's the master version. We don't want everybody else in the world seeing you break it or something like that. So
I'll make sure that link immediately takes you to a copy page, so that way you don't even have to worry about that. Yeah,
very smart, Andrew.
I'll show you how to do that.
All right, cool. Well, with that said, let us dive in. All right, so here we have the sponsored products campaign placement bidding adjustment calculator. The purpose of this, and hopefully you guys should all know this, hopefully if you're this deep into our podcast, or maybe you searched specifically for how to calculate placements and you found this video, you should be aware that within your sponsored product campaigns, Amazon gives you the ability to increase your bids for specific placements, whether that's top of search, product pages, or rest of search. You would want to do this because obviously the performance between those placements will vary significantly because different placements are just going to have different click-through rates. Obviously, top of search is typically going to perform quite a bit better compared to something like product pages, which is super low below the fold. By nature, it's a second thought for someone else. They're already on another product page. They're already interested in another product. They're just trying to compare you really quickly to see if you're worth them changing their mind, but their mind's already set on something else that they clicked on. So what this calculator will help you do is figure out by how much you should be increasing for each placement in order to maximize your sales opportunity. So the way this calculator is going to work is you will take a campaign. You can also take a group of campaigns. If you download the placement data on a placement report from Amazon Ads Reports, or if you download a bulk file, you can get the placement data from there. You'd have to pivot table all that stuff out to generate that. Andrew, we could probably do another video sometime on that.
Yeah, that'd be
good.
We
do it in the masterclass. Yeah, we do it in the masterclass. That's for sure, showing you how to do this for your entire account or for groups of campaigns. But simply put, if you're just trying to do this in the ad console, you can just go one campaign at a time, plug that in there, or take a group of campaigns and pivot the data all together into a single table. Now, it's very important to note that this whole methodology revolves around revenue per click. Better said, the relative revenue per click between these placements. If you don't know what revenue per click is or why we're using that, go back and check out the episode, Why Revenue Per Click is King. and that should definitely explain that for you, so we don't need to waste any more time here on that. And you're going to take your campaign placement data, you're going to be filling in all of these yellow cells. Now, technically, you only need to fill in, for this calculator to work, you only need to fill in the sales and the clicks data, because that's just going to be filling in the revenue per click for us. It'll be calculating that, and all these placements are calculated based on the revenue per click. However, I always like seeing my click-through rates, my CPCs, my conversion rates. So I like to fill in all these, the yellow cells, just so I can get the full view. But if you've been using this for a while and you're just trying to really just get down to the function without doing all the deeper analysis, all you need is sales and clicks. So Andrew, you think that's clear to everyone how to use this so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think everybody will kind of get it. There's going to be differing performances across these different placements, and we're going to use the data to figure out, where we should be increasing our bids, where the performance is better. All makes sense. I did want to call out just real quickly, just a side note on the comment you made about grouping data and using multiple campaigns to kind of group data. Just real quickly, I know we've talked about it a ton of times, but there are times if you're just looking at an individual campaign, you may not have enough data across that single campaign to make informed optimizations. And so one thing you could do is look at a larger grouping of campaigns, say, a campaign that has one product in it, has multiple different campaigns, for that one product. You could group those together to get an idea of the average performance of that product across different placements. So
right.
A lot of times what I'll do with that is, and this is where it gets really important, just being really organized with your account. I love having portfolios set up, because that makes it really easy. When I pull any of those reports, I can quickly group by products or categories or however I have my portfolios organized. So I definitely like to have those set up. And then if you don't have those set up, this is when campaign naming would be really important. So you could quickly slice out the exact campaigns that you need. But anyway, just wanted to touch on that real quick. We'll make a separate video talking about that another time and showing you how to slice that data out a little bit more easily. But that's all I had.
Yep. All of it's already in the masterclass if you don't want to wait for that video to come out. So you can check that out in the description below. But the final thing I'll say on the sponsored products before we move on to the sponsored brands, something that's very, very important to note, is that the way this logic works is no matter what, there will always be one placement for which the bid adjustment is set to 0%. And then the other two placements will be increases based on the relatively better performance of those placements compared to the worst performing placement. Why is that? Well, number one, these are the only three possible placements. It doesn't make sense to have an increase on all three of them, because you might as well just increase your keyword bid, right? Like if all of them were increased by 100%, that's the same as just increasing all your bids by 100%. So that makes no sense. So the purpose of this whole exercise is to find the worst performing placement that is set to 0%. We can't go negative. Amazon will not allow us to apply a negative value to sponsored product campaigns. So what we'll have to do there to solve for that is we will then do a negative, let's just say product pages we end up finding out is like worth 25% less compared to everything else. What we would have to do is we would take all the keyword bids and we would reduce all of them in the campaign down by an additional 25% after doing all of our calculations for the keyword bids themselves. So, you calculate the keyword bids based off of the methods we've shown you guys, and then you apply that placement modifier variable, which then downbids everything further. And that is how you sufficiently and effectively downbid the worst performing placement, which in this case would be product pages. And then to make sure, because you've decreased all those bids, you don't want to lose that top of search visibility or the conversions that are happening on rest of search. You can actually see here just on these conversion rates, and this is a live account of ours, that the conversion rate difference between product pages to rest of search is more than double, and going from product pages to top of search is more than triple. And so you can see we're going to have some pretty substantial bid adjustments here, increasing the bids by practically a 2x increase on rest of search. That's what that 100% increase means. And then going up to a 3 times higher bid on top of search. That's what that increasing by an additional 200% means. So when you do all this, what that's going to allow you to do is for every single one of your keywords, as well as for every single one of your placements, you will be able to align your CPC to your revenue per click ratio, and they'll stay in balance, which is basically how you hit the target ACoS across your entire campaign and with everything within that campaign. Because at the end of the day, ACoS is just a ratio of spend to sales. And so we are trying to align our CPC with our RPC to hit that target ACoS on every level. When you do it this way, when you do this effectively, aligning that CPC with the RPC, what you're able to do is get more total volume within your target ACOS, as opposed to what most people do, which is highly inefficient, where you have some keywords or some placements with really low ACOS and other ones with really high ACOS, and this misallocation of spend. Maybe at the end of the day, your account's totaling up to being on target, but you're losing a lot of volume because of all of those inefficiencies. So all of this is designed to allow you to maximize total sales volume, total traffic, total click volume within that target ACOS. So hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, comment below. But with that, let's now switch over to the sponsored brand side and take a closer look at this.
All right, good stuff, Steven. I think that makes sense for sponsored products. Now, there are some differences between sponsored products and sponsored brands in terms of how the placements work, number one, as well as just the different placements that you have. So with sponsored products, those are those in-search ads that look just like a product listing. With sponsored brands, we have those top of search headline ads. We have rest of search at the bottom of those search pages, on product pages. But then you can also see them on home pages sometimes. So I'm curious to see how this will all work in sponsored brands comparative to sponsored products, where there's those 3 placements pretty consistent across everything. Biggest difference here is I see there's more placements, and also I think that the way this adjustment works is a little bit different. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So things definitely get a little bit weird when it comes to the sponsored brand side of things. So the first weird thing with sponsored brands, and I always think this is really funny and laughable. With sponsored products, they say, hey, here's the opportunity to increase your bids for top of search. And then with sponsored brands, it says, hey, here's the opportunity to decrease your bids for placements not top of search. However, you can also increase those bids for placements not top of search. So you're not even married to increase or you don't have to decrease. You can actually increase your placements for not top of search. Now, where you would see that performance is better for non-top of search placements as opposed to top of search, very rare, but it can happen. So this whole calculator does account for that, in which the final adjustments, you can see in the example here, all of these placements are negative decreases because that's typically what you're going to see happen. We're decreasing for not top of search. But if there's the scenario in which placements are higher, then it will we'll be increasing there. Now, for top of search specifically, you cannot make any changes here or modifiers here. It's locked in at whatever the keyword bid is by default what your top of search bid is. So the placement modifier here, like that whole campaign placement modifier thing that we attach to all of our campaigns, becomes a little bit different here, because typically on sponsored products, it's always going to be a decrease amount based on the worst performing placement. It's always going to be decreasing. When we get to sponsored brands, sometimes we're actually increasing the base bids on these keywords. And the way in which that works is basically like you can look at some of these CPCs here and the revenue per click and also just these conversion rates, But, if you're trying to decrease product pages by 56% and you still want to maintain that same level of visibility up at top of search, then you would actually need to add on like an additional 20% or additional 25% to all the bids in that campaign, all the keyword bids in that campaign, in order to, that's like your workaround for increasing your top of search bids, and then you can decrease for all the other placements. Now, the way in which you're going to use this calculator is, once again, you will download a Sponsored Brands Placements report. You'll fill all this stuff in, all this information in. You can also grab this from a bulk sheet download. Caveat on that is Amazon has their legacy Sponsored Brands bulk sheet, which does not have bidding adjustments in there. And then there is the Sponsored Brands multi-ad groups, which does have the placement settings in there. However, that is only for the multi-ad group sponsored brand ads. So basically any sponsored brand campaign that was created after October 2022, there's a specific date within October, I forget which date it is, but any campaigns that are created after that will be multi-ad group sponsored brand ads, in which you can obviously create multiple ad groups. All the campaigns before that were fixed, where it was by default, there was only one ad group. You couldn't add more ad groups. Amazon is deprecating those sponsored brand campaigns. I think by the end of this year, 2024, they're going to be getting rid of all of those. So we all have to do some work on migrating these old legacy campaigns over to the new version. But once you do have those campaigns on the new version 2 of Sponsored Brands with multi-ad groups, you'll be able to get this placement data within that bulk sheet. And what you will find is that within that bulk sheet, Amazon gives you these three, placement opportunities where they can say, hey, you can increase or decrease your bid on this bulk sheet by this amount. Now, another caveat, if you're in the ad console, you will see that Amazon doesn't give you the ability to control the bid specifically for rest of search versus product pages versus homepage within the ad console. What they're going to give you is they will just give you this figure right here, which says bid adjustments for not top of search, which will apply to everything, all three of those placements combined. So if you want to control them individually, the only way to do that is through a bulk file. So what we have here for you guys is we have both calculations. So you can either do this in the ad console and just use this value for everything, or you can apply the adjustments individually for each placement with these calculations here.
Yeah, and I think it's important everybody knows this too, that by default, whenever you're going in and setting up a campaign in the console, setting up a sponsored brand ad, Amazon's by default going to have selected a little toggle that says automatically optimize bids for placements, which is essentially giving Amazon the control to actually to manipulate these bid adjustments on your other non-top of search placements. So important to know, that's going to be selected by default if you're doing it manually. So you'll want to deselect that to open up the capability for you to do this. But then in the bulk sheet, that's where you're going to be able to see all of these different placements. And then if you're building a sponsored brand campaign in a bulk sheet, there's a column that's called bid optimization strategy or bid strategy. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what it's called. But in there, you can select true or false. If you say true, that means Amazon's going to leave it automated and they're going to calculate the placement settings. If you say false, that gives you the ability to then go in and create these placement modifications. So important to keep that in mind as well.
Yep. Great clarification. Thank you for that. The way this works is we are calculating, we'll just take rest of search, for example. We are calculating the relative underperformance of the revenue per click on rest of search compared to top of search. Now, this campaign, or was this a campaign? No, this was actually, I summed this for an entire profile of mine for all of their sponsored brand ads. This is the total account level data, which you can do it either way. You can either do it for the whole account. It's not going to be, it's going to be basically a generalization of all your sponsored brands data, or you can do it for each individual campaign. A couple of the problems with doing it for each individual campaign is, number one, it just takes a long time. Number two, you're going to end up in a scenario a lot of the time where you have low data confidence because these campaigns, if it only has, 3 orders in total in the campaign, and it's unlikely that there's an order on each of the placements. And if it even does have one order, and if it's like one click, one order, it's not super reliable in terms of calculating that. So the way in which we solve this with Ad Labs is we'll calculate it for each individual campaign if each of the placements have enough data. If they don't, we then reference a group of campaigns that Andrew wonderfully described before, where it's campaigns of the similar products or the exact same product or the product within a specific tactic, whether that's brand defense or going after non-brand keywords. And so we'll reference the placements over a larger data set. And then if that campaign group doesn't have enough data, then we reference the total account. So keep that in mind when you are applying this. And going back to the example of rest of search, you see the revenue per click here is underperforming the top of search revenue per click by around 28%. And that's all it is. So we are going to be decreasing the placement specifically for rest of search by 28%. Now, on this account, something that's really interesting, and I haven't gotten a chance to really dive into this just yet, but the conversion rate is actually better on rest of search compared to top of search. And I wonder why that is. But I will tell you from knowing this account that I can also see the average order value, and I know that they have different products. So from my perspective, what it seems like is the more expensive product that we have, the more premium product, is driving a lot more of the sales at top of search compared to some of the other products. And so that difference in the average order value is likely reflective of the different products that are getting placements. So that's a good indicator that we should probably be breaking this down to the individual groups of campaigns for these different products with different AOVs. That would get us a little bit of a more accurate dialed in placement adjustment here. But that is why we don't go strictly off of the conversion rates. That is why we go off of the revenue per click difference. Because, and again, that revenue per click is king episode will break this down for you, but revenue per click combines both conversion rate and average order value, and it gives us a much better picture of basically how many sales, what's the sales opportunity there for a PPC platform. It's the only way to do things. So even though the conversion rates are better here, and maybe those conversion rates are better because the product is a cheaper product, that's actually likely what it is. Like, it's a lower AOV item, higher chances of conversion compared to a more expensive product, which is going to have a lower conversion rate just because people are more price sensitive these days. But even with the lower conversion rate, you can still see that the revenue per click is higher based on the higher AOV. And so that's why we're going to be optimizing based off of this revenue per click as opposed to simply conversion rate. Does that make sense, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. This is very clear.
Now, you'll also see in here homepage placements, which is very interesting. Apparently, sponsored brands are starting to appear on the homepage, meaning people go to Amazon.com, and there are sponsored brands there. Super weird.
I've been seeing those. I don't
How
like
did
it.
they get there? What keyword did we target? What keyword did I target that landed me on the homepage before someone typed into the search bar or anything?
Right.
Now,
yeah.
I'm targeting people's search history, maybe? I don't know. It's gotta be, right?
Amazon.com, baby.
Well, I meant like if they previously searched for something and like, okay, we can
I know, I got you.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are no targets for homepage, by the way. Like, you can't just say you want to target Amazon's homepage.
Placements. Yeah. Make sure you add Amazon.com to your product listing for better SEO for the homepage placement.
Very valuable. Major hack.
Yeah. In general, though, the homepage data that I've seen, I mean, this is my whole entire account here, and there's only 350 impressions, almost no clicks. Or, I mean, actually no clicks or orders. And I've tried increasing this slightly. Like, I raised homepage by like 50%. Didn't really make a difference. I wasn't in the mood to keep close tabs on it because, again, this data is not directly in the ad console. So anytime I want to check up on it, you got to download a report. It's kind of annoying. So I didn't feel like keeping close tabs on it, so I didn't really push the experiment any further. I just tried raising it, didn't really see too much of a difference. Point being, the revenue per click here is divided by 0, right? We're getting an error. So this is a good example of a low data confidence environment in which we can't really do this. Or actually, let's just pretend I had like 1 click and 1 order on here with, what was my average AOV? 40, let's say 44, right?
40. Yeah, 44.
Yeah. This would look really bad. This looks like my revenue per click now is $44 per click, which is insanely high and going to be not good for business because it's a low data calculation. And look at what the bid adjustment did. It stayed. It did not increase. So you're welcome. We built in a little data confidence checker in which if there's not enough data for this specific placement, we will then be using basically this value, the general adjustment for all non-top of search placements, which this is just calculated based off of the sum of all the sales for all 3 placements that are not top of search over the sum of all the clicks that are not top of search. So we're aggregating all of the non-top of search placements RPC compared to the top of search RPC, and that's how we get this generalization. So for rest of search, we have enough data confidence. We'll go minus 28% to calculate that. For product pages, as is to be expected, even worse conversion rate. And so the bid adjustment here is going to be even steeper. That'll save us some costs. As you can see here, the spend here is already pretty low. And that's because the CPCs are low. That's because we've already been implementing this. So you can actually already start to see some of how this is the effectiveness of this, because both of these clients, these are 2 different clients, but both of them, you can see how much we've successfully mitigated the spend where like the ACoS is much higher on product pages. You can see how successfully we've practically almost paused these placements just as we're trying to decrease the bids for those elements. So just someone was asking, can you prove that this works? And I was like, well, the sample data in there is from a real account, so that should be some proof. But when we come down to the home page, because we don't have any sales click data, or we don't have enough click data here, we're just doing the total of, it's basically the average of rest of search and product pages combined, not necessarily the average of the percentage points themselves, because that would just be bad math, but the average of their total sales and total clicks data. Now, if you're wondering, what do we use to calculate the data confidence? It's a pretty simple formula, but we say that each placement must have at least as many clicks as the average clicks to orders ratio for this entire for the total data. So If we do clicks divided by orders, that's basically just the inverse of conversion rate. So, right, conversion rate's orders over clicks. We're doing the opposite. So if we're averaging a 20% conversion rate, flip that upside down. That's an average of 5 clicks to conversions. So this would need at least 5 clicks until we can calculate, okay, here's the bid adjustment here is minus 99%. All right, so as soon as I entered that, it said that the bid adjustment should go to minus 99%, which we knew was inaccurate if the revenue per click here was practically the same as top of search. So we realized there was actually a mistake. We missed the parentheses. We had one of the parentheses was off. So glad we caught that, and we just double checked everything. Now this is good to go. Good for sharing out. So on this example, you'll see here that if the homepage had at least one order on 5 clicks. Sure, that's kind of relatively low data, like it's only 5 clicks, but we're going to count it because on average for this whole account, we do convert on an average of every 5 clicks lends itself to a conversion. So it seems to be, pretty relevantly data confidently high, I guess. And if this converted on, let's just say 10 clicks and one order, then that, the revenue per click's coming down. That just got chopped in half. So that makes sense that we would now be reducing by 50% compared to the top of search kind of base bid that we're doing. And instead of 5 clicks, if this was down to 4 clicks, now we're not at the click confidence threshold yet. So this value is going to default to kind of the whole group of the non-top of search placements. And that's going to be how that works. Now, you can, if you'd like to see, instead of if just 5 clicks, if just like one of your average clicks to conversions, having at least as many clicks as your average clicks to conversions isn't enough for you, you could probably modify this. This is the average. You could just change this to like 2x, I think. I hope I don't break it right now. So yeah, so now, this can get up to 8 clicks, not yet confident. Get this up to 10 clicks. Boom, now we've got the confidence. So in case if you're savvy enough and you want to mess with these formulas, again, that is why you make a copy of this. You can go break it. If you do break it, just come back and make another copy. But just make sure every time you come back to this video, you are liking and commenting and subscribing, because that makes us happy. Andrew, go ahead with something. I have nowhere else to go there. Save me.
That's okay. That's what I'm here for. This is really well said. Biggest difference between how you're optimizing placements in sponsored products versus sponsored brands. With sponsored products, we're setting our base bids, increasing our placements based on the relative efficiency performance on those placements. With sponsored brands, we're setting our top of search bids and then decreasing for our worst performing placements, or increasing if we happen to see that, performance on one of these other placements is better. So I think the main takeaway here and the main action step for anybody listening or watching is to go download that report, make a copy of this sheet, plug in your data, and start seeing how you can add some additional layers of optimization to your sponsored brands, which is super important. I mean, Amazon's rolling out more and more sponsored brand stuff. I imagine more people are starting to allocate additional spend there. Being able to dial this stuff in is going to be really crucial for you to be able to maintain good performance with those sponsored brands, because those CPCs can get pretty pricey. And I think that, most people aren't even talking about how to optimize sponsored products accurately or precisely,
right. Yeah.
Let alone sponsored brands. This is definitely one that I don't think a lot of people are necessarily implementing super well. So that's the main takeaway here. Go in and start making those adjustments, or, you could just get Ad Labs and it does it all for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say the biggest mistake that I see so many people make is they say, if you're increasing your placements for top of search by 100%, then you need to decrease all your keyword bids by 50%. And that will allow an offset, like decrease by 50%, increase by 100%. And I have to tell you, that is so wrong, because the individual keyword bids data, like that would work if like all of the keywords bids, like all of the RPC and the clicks and the conversion on that order were like, on that keyword were like 100% from top of search, then yeah, that would make sense. But the keyword itself, like when you're calculating that bid, It's a combination of all the possible placements. So the correct formula to calculate the placement mod variable for all your keywords, it has to factor in general, how many clicks are coming from each placement, how many sales are coming from each placement, because that, the keyword's naturally going to be weighted a little more towards top of search data versus product page data. So you have to factor that in to everything. Now, people constantly ask us, how do you add this? What's the campaign placement modifier variable thing? And I have to tell you, on this podcast, we will disclose to you everything that we know except for the campaign placement modifier variable. And I'm sorry that we have to say that. I know in the past we said we'd release it one day, but as time has gone on, we've come to the conclusion that this element is way too important for us and our clients, for the accounts that we manage, to maintain our competitive advantage against our competitors, the competitors of the brands that we're managing. And for AdLabs, it's a main competitive advantage compared to all the other software tools. And for anyone who's using AdLabs, we don't want someone else to be able to replicate this and lose the competitive edge that our users have against everyone else using the other tools. So we think it's extremely, extremely important. Now, if you do use AdLabs, all of this is built into it at the campaign for every individual campaign, like I said. And if the campaign's low data confidence, we use the campaign group, all that stuff. And in the masterclass, we do break down how to add that placement modifier variable. And this just so happened that today I got this message in my LinkedIn box, like literally right before we started sending this. But this comes from a guy who is an AdLabs member. He got the course, and he said to me,
he's a masterclass member.
He's a masterclass member. We'll throw up the screenshot too here, but we'll keep his name anonymous and blur that out. But he said, hey, going to be completely honest with you here. In my opinion, you should really double think if you should share that placement modifier formula, because it really sets you apart from the other PPC agencies. Seriously unique and gives you a huge advantage. Just my thoughts, haha. Now, I'm thinking he paid quite a bit of money to get this course. Surely he must be thinking that of something else that we did for free somewhere else, not something that he paid for. And so I say, haha, you mean the masterclass? And he goes, yeah, haha. And then I said, how would his name then ever learn it? And he said, LOL, I never would have learned it, and AdLabs would have been the only way I could have done it. Nah, but seriously, the idea behind it is genius. Thanks for sharing. Good to understand what AdLabs is doing. So even as a paying member of the masterclass, he still thought this piece of information was more valuable than what he actually paid for the class, to the fact that he reached out and was like basically saying you should cut that from the masterclass. That's too much value, man.
Take it out.
Now, I mean, the masterclass is small. It's we only have 8 students so far signed up, something like that. So it's a pretty small community, and we're very eager to have that super hands-on coaching, consulting with these students, and really dive into more technical details. I'm not super concerned. There's so many agencies out there, so many brands, so much opportunity on Amazon. We're not super concerned with we're not trying to keep it exclusively to ourselves, but we are trying to keep it to a rather smaller circle of our audience. We don't want it to just be public information out there for PackView, Perpetua to take this and then fix their broken algorithms that is causing so many people to churn and come over to AdLabs anyways. So hopefully that all makes sense. Hopefully nobody's mad at us for having to do this, but I will just say, I will give you this. If you've made it this far to the end of the episode, I will give you a free general guidance here, where typically on sponsored products, you will, if you are using this bid adjustment calculator, you'll probably be wanting to reduce product pages or your total base bids by around maybe 30-ish% is probably a good safety. So after you do all those calculations that we showed you how to do for your keyword bids, and after you implement these campaign adjustments, you then want to decrease all those bids by an additional roughly 30%. And then for sponsored brands, most of the time that placement modifier is going to work to the inverse, where you're now increasing all of your base bids to target that top of search placement. There, you're generally probably going to be wanting to increase somewhere by 25 to 50-ish% to really win those top of search placements. And then you can, kind of bulk decrease everywhere else. So hopefully all that makes sense for you guys.
All right, good stuff. Well, hopefully you got some value from that. Be sure to go click the link down below to download this for yourself, make a copy. And with that, that's all we have for you this week. Come back next week for another episode of That Amazon Ads Podcast.
See you guys.